My daughter asked the question with a juice box in one hand and the brutal confidence of a 7-year-old with no mortgage. Miss Elise, she called across the fence, why do you always watch my dad mow the lawn? The mower was still running, but I heard every word. That was the strange part. I shouldn't have. I was halfway down the side yard, sweating through an old gray t-shirt, pushing my mower in crooked lines because the left wheel had been wobbling for 3 weeks. The engine was loud enough to wake the dead and offend the living. But somehow, right as my daughter said it, I turned off the mower. Perfect timing. Terrible timing. Elise Harper was standing on her back steps in a pale blue sundress, one hand wrapped around a coffee mug, the other frozen on the railing. She lived in the small yellow house behind mine, the one with the rosemary bushes, the chipped porch swing, and the kitchen window that looked directly into my backyard. For almost 2 months, I had felt her watching me on Saturday mornings. Not in a creepy way. At least, that was what I told myself. More in the way you feel sunlight on the back of your neck before you look up and see the sky is clear. I'm Owen Mitchell. I was 34 years old, divorced, and doing my best to raise my daughter, Sophie, without turning into one of those men who considered not burning dinner a personality trait. I worked as a claims adjuster for a home insurance company, which meant I spent my weekdays inspecting storm damage, arguing with contractors, and climbing roofs that looked much safer from the ground. Saturday mornings were my reset. I mowed the lawn, Sophie chalked the driveway. I pretended we were a calm, functioning family. And Elise watched from next door. She was 31, a freelance book editor, and the kind of woman who made quiet seem interesting. Dark hair usually twisted up with a pencil through it. Bare feet on her porch. Reading glasses she wore on top of her head and then spent 10 minutes looking for. She had moved in at the beginning of spring alone with too many boxes of books and one enormous plant she talked to like it had disappointed her. The first time we met, I was wrestling a broken mailbox post out of the ground. She stopped by my driveway and said, "I was going to introduce myself, but you look like you're losing a fight to a stick." I looked down at my muddy hands. It insulted my family. "Then finish it." That was Elise. Dry as a good martini. Soft when you didn't expect it. Dangerous to a man trying to keep his life simple. Sophie adored her immediately. Elise let her name the rosemary bushes. She had opinions about sidewalk chalk colors. She once spent 20 minutes explaining to Sophie why commas mattered, then winked at me and said, "Your dad should learn this too." "I use commas," I said. "You use them like a man throwing birdseed." I should have disliked her. Instead, I started checking my hair before mowing. Not obviously. I wasn't pathetic. Just, if a man happens to notice he looks like a tired raccoon in the bathroom mirror and decides to splash water on his face, that's not a crime. My divorce had taught me caution. My ex-wife Natalie and I weren't enemies, but we had broken each other down in slow, ordinary ways. Too much resentment. Too little tenderness. By the end, we talked mostly through shared calendars and tired sighs. So when Elise moved in and made me laugh without making me feel measured, I noticed. Then I told myself to stop noticing. Single fathers don't get to be reckless. Every feeling has to pass through the question, will this hurt my child? And Sophie, unfortunately, had inherited my timing and her mother's directness. That morning, she had been sitting cross-legged in the grass near the fence, building a chalk city on a piece of cardboard because I'd told her not to draw on the patio again. Elise stood on her back steps, coffee steaming, watching me make another pass along the yard. I felt her gaze. I pretended not to. Then Sophie looked up and destroyed my life. "Miss Elise, why do you always watch my dad mow the lawn?" Elise's face changed. Not guilty, not offended, caught. She glanced toward me, and I had the insane impulse to start the mower again and flee behind noise. But my hand stayed on the handle. The summer air pressed hot against my neck. A bee bumped lazily around the clover. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked like it knew something. Elise lowered her coffee mug. "Sophie," I said, too late. My daughter waved me off without looking. "It's okay, Dad. I'm asking politely." Elise laughed once, but it didn't quite land. "You are, very politely." "So?" Sophie asked. Elise looked at my daughter, then she looked at me. For 1 second, the humor left her face and I saw something unguarded there. Something lonely, maybe, or brave. Maybe both. She walked down the 2 steps into her yard and came closer to the fence. Not close enough to touch, but close enough that I could see the tiny green paint stain on her thumb. I watch, Elise said slowly, because your dad looks peaceful when he thinks no one expects anything from him. I froze. So did Sophie, though probably for different reasons. Elise swallowed, then gave a small, embarrassed smile. And because he's handsome. But you didn't hear that from me. My daughter's eyes widened like she had just discovered buried treasure. I forgot how hands worked. The mower handle slipped from my grip and thudded against the grass. Elise winced. Well, that was supposed to stay in my inside voice. Sophie turned to me with the kind of delighted horror only children and courtroom attorneys can manage. Dad, she whispered loudly, Miss Elise thinks you're handsome. I heard, I said. Elise lifted her mug as if to hide behind it, but her eyes stayed on mine. There was a challenge in them now, nervous but real. The kind that asks, are you going to pretend I didn't say that? I wanted to. Honestly, I did. Pretending was safe. Pretending kept fences where they belonged. Pretending meant Sophie didn't get attached to someone who might not stay. But Elise was still standing there in the sun, cheeks pink, chin lifted, not taking it back. And I was tired of being the man who only made careful choices. So I leaned one forearm on the fence and said, for the record, I only mow this side of the yard twice because your kitchen window faces it. Elise blinked. Then she smiled. Not a polite smile. Not neighborly. A real one. The kind that hits a man in the chest before he has time to brace for it. Sophie gasped. You knew? I suspected, I said. Elise tilted her head. Twice, huh? Sometimes 3 times if you're wearing the glasses. Her mouth fell open, and then she laughed, bright and startled, and I felt something in me loosen that had been tight for years. Sophie looked between us like she was watching the best television of her life. Then she stood, brushed grass from her knees, and announced, I'm going inside to get lemonade because this is awkward but important. Sophie, I said. What? Grown-ups need drinks when they're having feelings. She marched toward the back door before I could stop her. That left Elise and me on opposite sides of the fence, the mower quiet behind me, the whole neighborhood suddenly too still. Elise traced one finger along the top rail. I'm sorry if I made things weird. You didn't. Owen. Okay, you did. I smiled, despite myself. But not bad weird. Her eyes softened. There was a breeze, just enough to lift a strand of hair against her cheek. I had the ridiculous urge to reach through the fence and tuck it back. Instead, I stayed where I was. Because wanting something and being ready for it are not the same thing. Elise seemed to know that too. She looked toward my house where Sophie had disappeared, then back at me. She's a good kid. She is. She watches you too, you know. That caught me off guard. What? Elise's voice quieted. When you're fixing things, cooking, folding laundry on the patio table because you forgot to bring the basket outside. That was 1 time. It was 4 times. I sighed. Traitor window. She looks at you like she's checking whether you're happy. That landed harder than the handsome part. I looked down at my grass-stained shoes. Elise didn't rush to fill the silence. That was one of the things I liked about her. She didn't panic when a moment became honest. Finally, I said, I'm not always sure what happy is supposed to look like anymore. Her hand stilled on the fence. No, she said. Me neither. When I looked up, she wasn't teasing now. For the first time since she'd moved in, I wondered if her quiet house wasn't peaceful. Maybe. It was just quiet. The back door opened behind me, and Sophie came out carrying a tray with 3 plastic cups of lemonade, concentrating like she was transporting medical organs. I made drinks, she said, and I only spilled a little. Elise smiled, but her eyes were still on me. Then Sophie reached the fence, lifted 1 cup toward Elise, and asked, Do you want to come over instead of watching from there? Elise's fingers tightened around the rail. I could see the decision move across her face. Neighbor or something else. Safe distance or step through the gate. She looked at Sophie, then at me. And just when I thought she would laugh it off, Elise whispered, I want to, more than I probably should. Then my daughter, my sweet little chaos agent, looked up at her and said, Is it because you're in love with my dad? Elise went completely still, and this time she didn't answer right away. Elise stared down at Sophie like my daughter had just handed her a live grenade instead of lemonade. Sweetheart, I said carefully, that's not really something you ask people. Sophie frowned. Why? Because adults get strange about honest questions. That's true, Elise murmured. I looked at her. She looked at me. And then, to my absolute shock, she didn't run. She opened the little gate between our yards and stepped through. It was such a small thing, a hinge creaking, a bare foot crossing from her grass into mine. But something about it felt bigger than it should have. Like a line had been there for weeks and she had finally decided she was tired of respecting it. Sophie handed her the lemonade. Elise took it, then crouched until she was eye level with my daughter. I don't know if I'm in love with your dad. My lungs forgot their job. But, Elise continued, glancing up at me, I like him very much, and I like you too, which makes it more important that I don't say careless things. Sophie considered this with the seriousness of a tiny judge. Do you want to have dinner with us? She asked. Sophie, I warned. What? She said she likes us. Elise's mouth twitched. Your logic is terrifying. It's chicken nugget night. That is persuasive. I should have stopped it. I should have said we didn't want to impose, or that Elise probably had plans, or some other cowardly sentence dressed up as manners. Instead, I heard myself say, You could come over tonight if you want. Elise stood slowly. There was heat in her cheeks again, but her eyes didn't leave mine. Are you asking because Sophie did, or because you want me there? There it was. No hiding. No letting the child do the brave work. I set my lemonade on the fence post and wiped my palm on my jeans, though it didn't help. Because I want you there. The answer changed her face. Not dramatically. Elise wasn't dramatic that way, but something in her softened, like she had been braced for disappointment, and I had surprised her. Then yes, she said. I'd like that. Sophie pumped both fists in the air. Romance nuggets. Absolutely not calling them that, I said. We are definitely calling them that, Elise said. I pointed at her. You're supposed to be on my side. She took a sip of lemonade, eyes smiling over the rim. I crossed the fence, Owen. I never promised loyalty. That was how Elise Harper ended up in my kitchen at 6:30 that evening, wearing jeans, a white blouse, and those reading glasses that did unfortunate things to my concentration. She brought a peach pie from the bakery downtown and a bottle of sparkling lemonade because, as she said, I panicked and bought things with fruit. Sophie had changed into her purple dress with the silver stars, which meant she considered this a formal occasion. I had changed shirts 3 times and still landed on one that made me look like I was attending a barbecue with emotional stakes. Dinner was supposed to be simple. Chicken nuggets, mac and cheese, carrot sticks I arranged on a plate to prove I understood vitamins. But with Elise sitting at our little round table, laughing, when Sophie explained the political system of her stuffed animals, the whole room felt different. Warmer. Less like a house I managed and more like a place someone might want to stay. At one point, Sophie spilled ketchup on her dress and declared it a blood tragedy, then ran upstairs to change. The second she was gone, the kitchen went quiet. Elise looked at the empty doorway, then back to me. She's wonderful. She is, I said. And exhausting. Most wonderful things are. I leaned against the counter, suddenly aware of how close she was. She sat at the table with one knee tucked beneath her, comfortable in my kitchen, in a way that made my chest ache. I should probably apologize, I said. For what? For letting my kid interrogate you about your feelings. Elise looked down at her glass, tracing the condensation with one finger. Maybe I needed someone to. The air shifted. I didn't move. She took a breath. I haven't been very brave lately. You seem brave to me. That's because you've only seen me insult your lawn patterns. They deserved it. They did. We smiled, but hers faded first. My last relationship ended badly, she said. Not violently or anything, just small. I made myself smaller for a long time, quieter, easier. Then when it ended, I promised myself I wouldn't want anyone for a while. Her eyes lifted to mine. Then you moved your grill 3 feet to the left because Sophie said the smoke bothered the ladybugs. I laughed softly. That did me in? That and the laundry folding. You fold towels like you're trying to solve a moral problem. I take household linen seriously. I know. Her voice lowered. That's the problem. Something tender pressed between us. I thought about all the Saturdays I had felt her watching and pretended it annoyed me. I thought about how long it had been since someone saw me not as useful or failing or overdue on something, but simply as a man. I was afraid to notice you, I admitted. Elise's lips parted. Because of Sophie? She asked. Because of Sophie. Because of my divorce. Because I'm rusty at anything that isn't work, school pickup, or pretending frozen waffles count as a plan. They do count. You're very supportive. I'm trying to get invited back. The laugh that came out of me was quiet, relieved. I stepped closer to the table. You don't have to try very hard. Her gaze dropped briefly to my mouth. It was so quick I might have missed it if every nerve in my body hadn't been paying attention. Then Sophie thundered down the stairs in pajamas with cartoon planets on them, and Elise sat back like she had been caught doing something criminal. I turned toward the sink and pretended to rinse a dish that was already clean. After dinner, we ate pie on the back patio under the string lights I had hung crookedly last summer. Sophie fell asleep halfway through her slice, curled in the outdoor chair with chocolate on her chin and one hand still clutching her fork. Elise and I sat side by side on the porch steps while the night settled around us. Her shoulder brushed mine. Neither of us moved away. I should take her inside, I said. In a minute, Elise whispered. So we stayed. Just 1 minute, then another. Her hand rested on the step between us. Mine was near it, close enough that I could feel the warmth of her skin without touching. Finally, Elise looked at me. If this is too much, tell me. What? She slid her fingers over mine, just that. A simple touch. But it hit me harder than any kiss I'd had in years. I turned my hand over and held hers. Her breath caught. I don't want to be your neighbor who watches from the porch, she said. What do you want to be? She squeezed my hand, brave and trembling all at once. I don't know yet, but I want the chance to find out. I looked at our joined hands, then at my sleeping daughter, then back at Elise, whose face was open in a way that made caution feel like fear wearing a respectable coat. You have it, I said. Her smile was small, but it lit everything. For a while, that was enough. Then my phone buzzed on the patio table. Natalie's name flashed across the screen. I almost ignored it. But when I picked up, her text was only 6 words. We need to talk about Sophie. I stared at Natalie's message long enough for the screen to dim. We need to talk about Sophie. 6 words had no right to feel that heavy. Elise's hand was still in mine. I felt the moment she noticed my body go rigid. Everything okay? She asked. I didn't answer quickly enough. She gently pulled her hand back, not offended, just careful. Like she knew exactly how fast a good moment could become complicated. It's Natalie, I said. Sophie slept in the patio chair between us and the yard, her face turned toward the string lights, one sock half off. Elise looked at her, then at me. Do you need to call her? I should. I hated that I had to say it. I hated more that I already felt myself stepping out of the warmth of the evening and back into the old hallway of obligations, misunderstandings, and defensive explanations. Elise stood. I'll help carry plates in. You don't have to leave. I know. Her voice was soft. But I also know what it looks like when a man is bracing for impact. That stopped me. Because she was right. I had been doing it for years, shoulders up, jaw tight, ready to explain myself before anyone accused me. I looked at her standing in the gold patio light, barefoot and beautiful, and too perceptive for my peace of mind. I don't want you to think this changes what I said, I told her. What did you say? That you have a chance. Her mouth curved faintly. That sounded very official. I'm rusty. Painfully. I laughed despite the knot in my stomach. Then Elise stepped closer and placed one hand on my forearm, not holding me back, just reminding me she was there. Owen, I'm not asking you to have an uncomplicated life. You have a daughter, you have an ex-wife, you have towels with moral issues. I noticed all that before I crossed the fence. My throat tightened. And you still crossed? Her thumb brushed once over my skin. I still crossed! For one reckless second, I wanted to kiss her right there beside the sleeping child and the dirty pie plates. Instead, I covered her hand with mine. I'll call you tomorrow, I asked. Her eyes flicked to my mouth, then back up. You'd better. It was not a kiss, but it felt like a promise. After Elise left through the side gate, I carried Sophie upstairs, tucked her under her quilt, and stood in the hallway longer than necessary before calling Natalie. She answered on the second ring. Is Sophie asleep? She asked. Just went down. What's going on? A pause. That was new. Natalie never paused unless she was trying not to say something sharp. She called me earlier, she said. From your tablet. I closed my eyes. Okay. She said you had a lady over for dinner. There it was. I leaned against the hallway wall. Elise, our neighbor. I know her name. Sophie told me. She also told me there were romance nuggets. Despite everything, I almost smiled. Natalie? I'm not trying to fight, she said quickly. That shut me up. She sighed. I'm really not. I don't want Sophie confused. Neither do I. Is it serious? I looked toward Sophie's closed door, then downstairs where the kitchen still smelled like peach pie and Elise's perfume. It's new, I said, very new. But you like her. It wasn't a question. Yes. Another pause. When Natalie spoke again, her voice was quieter. Then be careful. Not because I think you don't deserve someone. You do. But Sophie gets attached fast. I know. And so do you when you finally let yourself. That landed strangely, not cruel. Almost sad. For a second, I remembered the beginning with Natalie. We had loved each other once. Not enough in the end, but enough to leave behind proof. I won't introduce chaos into her life, I said. I'm not accusing you of that. You kind of are. I'm warning you because I know you. Her voice softened further. You'll either run because you're scared, or you'll try to make it perfect overnight. Don't do either. I had no comeback for that, because she was right too. Everyone apparently had decided to become accurate about me in the same 24-hour period. After we hung up, I cleaned the kitchen slowly. The empty chair Elise had used looked too meaningful, which annoyed me. Chairs should not have emotional authority. On the table beside the pie crumbs, I found a folded napkin. Inside, Elise had written in neat blue ink, "Thank you for the romance nuggets. For the record, your string lights are terrible. I liked them anyway." Under that, a phone number. I stood there grinning like an idiot. Then I texted her before I could talk myself out of it. Me. The string lights have character. Her reply came less than a minute later. Elise. They have a concussion. Me. Tomorrow. Coffee? Elise. Are you asking because Sophie would approve or because you want me there? Me. Because I want you there. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Elise. Then yes. The next morning I arrived at the little coffee shop on Maple 10 minutes early and spent 9 of them questioning my shirt. Elise walked in wearing a green dress and a denim jacket, hair loose around her shoulders, glasses tucked into the collar. I forgot the shirt entirely. She spotted me and smiled like she was trying not to. Hi, she said. Hi. That was smooth. I've been practicing. Keep at it. We ordered coffee and sat by the window. At first it felt almost too intimate without Sophie between us saying outrageous things. Just Elise and me, knees nearly touching under a small table, our hands wrapped around warm mugs. So, she said, do we discuss weather first or go straight to childhood wounds? I had a whole paragraph prepared about humidity. Save it for our third date. I stilled. Her cheeks pinked, but she didn't look away. This is a date? I asked. She lifted one shoulder. I wore the green dress. That means date? It means I changed clothes 4 times and yelled at a cardigan. I laughed, and the tension broke into something sweet. We talked for an hour, about books she edited, about roofs I'd fallen off, which she found less charming than I expected, about Sophie's obsession with naming inanimate objects, about the strange loneliness of being an adult who had technically built a life and still sometimes ate cereal over the sink. Then Elise's voice went quieter. I was nervous last night, she admitted. You didn't seem nervous? I'm an editor. I make panic look organized. What were you nervous about? She looked down at her cup. Wanting to be invited in, not just to dinner, to your life. The noise of the coffee shop faded around us. I reached across the table slow enough to let her choose. She did. Her fingers slid into mine. I want that too, I said. But I need to go slow. I can do slow. I mean really slow. Sophie has to come first. She should. And Natalie's right. Sophie attaches fast. Elise nodded. Then we don't make promises to her we haven't made to each other. The sentence hit me right in the chest. I squeezed her hand. That may be the most attractive thing anyone's ever said to me. Her smile turned wicked. Wait until you hear my thoughts on proper semicolon use. I was still laughing when my phone buzzed. A text from Natalie. Can we meet today? Just us. There's something else. Elise saw my expression shift. Her thumb moved gently over my knuckles. Go, she said. I don't want to end the date like this. Then don't. Before I could ask what she meant, she leaned across the tiny table and kissed my cheek. Soft, warm, deliberate. When she pulled back, her eyes were bright and nervous. There, she whispered. Now the date ended properly. My heart was doing something embarrassing. Outside the window, a car horn blared, and life kept moving like nothing had happened. But for me, the world had tilted. Then Natalie's second text came through. Please don't bring Sophie, it's about Elise. I read Natalie's text twice. Please don't bring Sophie. It's about Elise. Across the table, Elise's smile faded. What? She asked. I could have lied. I could have said it was nothing, tucked the phone away, and protected the fragile little bubble we had made between coffee cups and almost touching knees. But if this was going to be anything real, I couldn't start by hiding things. Natalie wants to meet, I said. She says it's about you. Elise went very still. Not confused. Still. That scared me more than confusion would have. What does that mean? I asked. She looked toward the window where sunlight washed across the table and made her green dress look brighter than it had any right to. I don't know, she said. But she did. Or at least she knew enough to be afraid. I reached for her hand again. Elise. She let me take it, but her fingers were cold now. I don't want my past walking into your life before I'm ready to explain it, she whispered. Something in my chest tightened. Then let me say this. Before I go, I said, I'm not meeting Natalie so she can decide what I think about you. Elise looked back at me. I'm going because Sophie is involved, I continued. But whatever this is, I want to hear your side from you. Her eyes shone, though she blinked it back immediately. You're annoyingly decent, she said. I've been called worse. I'm sure. Your string lights alone invite criticism. I smiled, but neither of us laughed. When we stood outside the coffee shop, she hugged her arms around herself like the morning had turned cold. I wanted to touch her. I didn't know if I should. Then Elise stepped forward first. She pressed her forehead briefly against my chest. It was so vulnerable, so unlike her usual bright, careful teasing, that I forgot how to breathe. I wrapped my arms around her, just held her, no promises, no fixing, no questions. After a moment, she whispered, Please come find me after. I will. Even if what she says makes you nervous. I leaned back enough to see her face. Especially then. Natalie chose a bench at the park near the duck pond, which felt unfairly peaceful for a conversation that had my stomach in knots. She stood when I approached, smoothing her hands over her jeans. Thanks for coming, she said. What's going on? Natalie exhaled. First, I'm not trying to sabotage you. That's a concerning opening, I know. She glanced toward the pond. When Sophie told me Elise's name, I recognized it. Not immediately, but enough that I asked around. Natalie. I didn't dig for fun, Owen. I got worried. I folded my arms. About what? She was engaged to a man named Graham Voss. The name meant nothing to me. Natalie watched my face. He used to work with my cousin's husband. Charming guy in public. Not so charming in private, from what people said after she left. A hard, ugly feeling moved through me. Did he hurt her? I don't know details, and honestly, they aren't mine to tell. Natalie's voice softened. But I heard enough to think she may have come here to disappear for a while. I looked away. Elise's words came back to me. I made myself smaller for a long time. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because Sophie is already making room for her. And because you... Natalie stopped, then tried again. Because you like women who seem like they need somewhere safe to land. I stiffened. That's not fair. Maybe not. She nodded once. But maybe it's true. The old version of us would have turned that into a fight. I could feel it waiting there, familiar as a bruise. Instead, I sat on the bench. Natalie sat beside me, leaving space. I don't want to save Elise, I said after a while. Good. I want to know her. Natalie looked at me then, and for the first time in a long time, there was no resentment in her expression. Only recognition. Then do that, she said. Know her. Don't make a story around her. Don't make her prove she's okay, and don't let Sophie become the reason you move faster than you should. I stared at the ducks drifting across the pond. You've gotten wise since divorcing me, I muttered. I was always wise. You were distracted by my excellent hair. Despite everything, I laughed. So did she. It felt strange. Good, but strange. When I left the park, I didn't drive home right away. I sat in my truck and texted Elise. Me? Can I come over? Her reply came fast. Elise? Yes. Then another. Elise. I made tea because panic apparently has a beverage. I found her on her porch swing with 2 mugs beside her and her bare feet tucked beneath her. She had changed out of the green dress into soft pants and an oversized sweater. But somehow she looked even more beautiful, less polished, more real. I sat beside her. The swing shifted under our combined weight, bringing us shoulder to shoulder. I talked to Natalie, I said. Elise closed her eyes. She told you about Graham. Only his name, and that things were bad. Her hands tightened around her mug. I was going to tell you. I believe you. She opened her eyes, surprised. I mean it, I said. And you don't have to tell me everything today. For a few seconds, she looked like she might break. Then she set her tea down carefully. I wasn't in danger the way people imagine, she said. No dramatic bruises, no police sirens, just corrections, constant ones, my clothes, my laugh, my friends, my work. By the end, I asked permission without realizing I was doing it. My chest ached, but I stayed quiet. He hated that I read romance, she continued with a small, humorless smile. Said it made me unrealistic. Silly. Clearly a man of poor taste. That earned me a faint smile. When I left, I promised myself no more men with opinions about how much space I took up. She looked at me. Then I moved next to you. And watched me mow. And watched you mow. Her cheeks colored. At first because you were attractive and shirt adjacent. Shirt adjacent? That gray t-shirt is fighting for its life. I'll have you know that shirt has history. It has holes. History holes. She laughed and the sound loosened something in both of us. Then her expression sobered. But later I watched because you seemed kind without performing it. You listened to Sophie. You apologized to her. You danced in the kitchen when you thought no one saw. My dignity suffered a fatal wound. You saw that? Owen, your blinds are a decorative suggestion. I covered my face. She gently pulled my hand down. And I liked you, she whispered. Not because you looked safe. Because you looked like someone who was trying. I know how much trying costs. That was when I knew, not everything, not forever. I wasn't foolish enough to think one weekend could answer a lifetime. But I knew I wanted her. Not as a mystery. Not as a wounded woman next door. Not as Sophie's favorite adult with pie. Her. Elise, I said. I'm scared. Her face softened. Me too. I don't want to rush. Good. I don't want to hide either. Her breath caught. I turned toward her on the swing, our knees touched, then our hands. I want to take you to dinner, I said. A real date. No nuggets, no child referee, no pretending it's neighborly. She smiled slowly. Are you asking because you feel bad for me? No. Because Natalie warned you? No. Because you're helpless against my semicolon opinions? A little. Her laugh trembled. I brushed my thumb over her knuckles. Because I want you there. Elise leaned closer, eyes shining. Then yes, she whispered. This time, when I looked at her mouth, neither of us pretended not to notice. I kissed her softly. Just once. A careful, questioning kiss on a porch swing that creaked beneath us. But Elise answered by lifting her hand to my jaw and kissing me back, warm and sure enough that every cautious part of me went quiet. When we separated, she rested her forehead against mine. Well, she breathed. That was not neighborly. No. Good. I smiled against her cheek. Then, from my pocket, my phone buzzed. A text from Sophie's school. Reminder. Family picnic Friday. Students may bring parents and special guests. Elise saw it when I glanced down. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she looked up at me, half hopeful, half terrified, and I realized the next step was already standing in front of us. Elise read the school text over my shoulder, then looked at me like the invitation might explode. Family picnic Friday. Students may bring parents and special guests. I slipped the phone back into my pocket. You don't have to, I said. Her eyebrows lifted. That was fast. What? You deciding for me? I opened my mouth, then shut it. Fair. Elise leaned back on the porch swing, though her fingers stayed tangled with mine. Ask me, Owen. My pulse kicked once. Not because it was dramatic, because it was simple. And simple things I was learning could be terrifying when they mattered. Would you come with me and Sophie to her school picnic on Friday? Elise's face softened. As your neighbor, she asked. I shook my head. As my date. Her smile came slow, bright, and a little scared. Yes, she said. I'd like that. Then she kissed me again, and I forgot the picnic, the lawn, the fence, and every cautious speech I had ever given myself. Our real dinner date happened 2 nights later. No nuggets, no plastic cups, no Sophie announcing from across the table that romance is when people blink too much. I took Elise to a small Italian place, downtown with candles on the tables, and menus neither of us could pronounce confidently. She wore the green dress again because, according to her, it had unfinished business. I wore a button-down Sophie had approved after rejecting 2 others for sad uncle energy. For the first half hour, we were almost too polite. Then Elise dropped a noodle on her lap, muttered a word Sophie was not allowed to say, and looked at me in horror. I laughed so hard I had to put my fork down. There he is, she said, dabbing at her dress. Who? The man from the yard. Less braced, more annoying. I'm honored. You should be. After dinner, we walked along the river with our shoulders brushing. At the railing, Elise told me more about the woman she had been before Graham. Louder, messier, the kind who sang in bookstores if the right song came on. I told her about the man I had become after divorce, useful, tired, always waiting for the next thing to go wrong. I don't want to be fixed, she said. I don't want to fix you. What do you want? I turned to her under the street lamp. You, I said. As you are, as you get louder, as you take up space. I want to be there for that. Her eyes filled, but she smiled. That was dangerously close to a good line. I've been edited by the best. She stepped into me then, slid her arms around my neck, and kissed me like she had decided fear could wait its turn. By Friday, Sophie knew Elise was coming to the picnic. She handled it with great maturity by screaming into a pillow for 11 seconds. At the school field, she grabbed Elise's hand the second we arrived. You can sit on our blanket, but if anyone asks, you're my special guest and Dad's date. Both. It's efficient. Elise glanced at me, cheeks pink. Efficient is important. Natalie was already there, setting containers of fruit on a table. For one tense second, the four of us stood in the sunshine, surrounded by children, juice boxes, and emotional landmines. Then Natalie smiled at Elise. "Hi," she said. "I'm Natalie." "Elise? I've heard about the romance nuggets." Elise covered her face. "Of course you have." Natalie laughed, and the tightness in my chest eased. Later, while Sophie ran a three-legged race with a boy named Mason and accused him of having reckless feet, Natalie stood beside me watching Elise help a kindergartner open a pudding cup. "She seems good," Natalie said. "She is. You seem good too." I looked at her. There was no bitterness in her voice, no old hook waiting underneath. "Thank you," I said. Natalie nodded toward Elise. "Don't overthink it so hard you forget to enjoy it." "I'm trying. I know." Then Sophie came sprinting toward us, breathless and grass-stained. She threw one arm around me and one around Elise. "This is the best picnic," she declared. Elise went very still at first. Then she bent and hugged Sophie back. Not too tightly. Not like she was claiming something that wasn't hers. Just warmly, carefully. Like love, when it was new, deserved both courage and respect. That night, after the picnic, Elise and I stood between our yards at the little gate. For weeks, that fence had been a border, then a stage, then a joke. Now it was just wood. "I should go in," she said. "You should." Neither of us moved. She touched the top rail. "I'm glad Sophie asked me that awful question. Why do you always watch my dad mow the lawn?" Elise laughed softly. "I considered moving. I considered faking my death. Dramatic. You called my shirt adjacent." "It was." I stepped closer. "For what it's worth, I'm glad she asked, too." Elise's eyes lifted to mine. "Because I might have spent another year pretending I didn't know you were watching," I said. "And I might have spent another year pretending I wasn't hoping you'd look back." So I did. I looked back. I looked forward. I looked at the woman standing barefoot in the grass between our two houses, brave enough to cross a fence and honest enough to ask me not to decide for her. Then I kissed her beneath the crooked string lights. 6 months later, the fence was still there, but the gate almost never closed. Elise's porch swing had migrated to my patio after a storm cracked one of her steps. Her enormous plant sat by my kitchen window, thriving, despite my suspicion that it judged me. Sophie had taught Elise how to make pancakes shaped like clouds, and Elise had taught Sophie that commas were not optional decorations. Natalie and I became better co-parents than we had been spouses. Not perfect, but kinder. She even came to Sophie's winter recital and sat beside Elise without anyone needing a survival plan. As for me and Elise, we went slow. Real slow. Sunday coffee, Thursday dinners, walks after Sophie fell asleep at Natalie's, kisses in the driveway that lasted longer once we stopped pretending we were just saying goodnight. By the following spring, Elise had stopped watching me mow from her porch. Now she sat on my back steps with her coffee, wearing my old gray t-shirt with the history holes, calling out critiques like a woman with full legal authority over my lawn. "You missed a strip," she said one warm Saturday morning. "I left it for artistic balance." "You left it because you were looking over here." I turned off the mower. Sophie, now 8 and no less dangerous, looked up from her chalk drawing and grinned. I walked across the grass to Elise. She set down her mug, already smiling. "You know," I said, "this whole thing started because you couldn't stop staring." She reached up and tugged me closer by the front of my shirt. "This whole thing started," she said, "because you wanted me to." Then she kissed me in the morning sun with Sophie groaning, "Please, not in front of the Chalk Kingdom," and the crooked string lights swaying behind us like they had known all along. And for the first time in years, happiness didn't feel like something I had to define. It felt like grass under my shoes, lemonade on the table, a gate left open, and the woman I loved choosing to stay. What would you have done if your child asked your neighbor, right in front of you, why she was always watching you? Have you ever experienced something similar, where an innocent question exposed feelings everyone was trying to hide? Tell me your story in the comments. If you like this one, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.